Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of What Nobody Told Me After 65. Well, it's your lady on the go, lady in the know, Miss Info. You have reached the Information Nation, where knowledge is shared and wisdom exchanged for the betterment of a people. Let's get started. Well, let's see. I want to talk to you a little bit about there's a mouse in the house. Mickey Mouse. Who doesn't remember that song? Mickey Mouse. Yeah. Yeah, you're singing it right now. I know you are. The MC and the show host, James Wesley Dodd, was responsible for that jingle that's stuck in your head right now. Remember him? Yeah, he was the MC. He wrote that song. I always wanted to go to Disneyland, but it was not affordable. As an event planner, I was once hired to do a destination wedding, but that didn't happen, and nobody was more disappointed than me. But recently, the Disney company has made headlines for their depiction of stereotypical and racist storylines. Now, I went back into the history and the desire of the original Mouseketeer, Walt Disney, to understand where the wheels fell off in this enterprise. Because Disney is synonymous with wholesome goodness, happy times, happy kids, all of that. But let's take a look back. Walt Disney started his career in 1920 as an animator. 2 years later, he and a friend started Laugh-O-Grams Films. In 1923, he filed for bankruptcy, left for Hollywood as a cinematographer. With the help of his brother, Roy Disney, who was a lifelong business partner and a close friend, they soon had a solid team in California where Oswald the Lucky Rabbit was born. After a dispute with the distributors over Oswald and the rights to Oswald, Disney altered the character and renamed it Mortimer Mouse. His wife found Mortimer too stuffy, and they quickly rechristened him Mickey. Steamboat Willie debuted in 1928, and the rest is history. Throughout the 30s, more cartoons were produced with supporting players: Donald Duck, Pluto, Goofy, and a gang of characters that we all remember. Now, as Walt Disney Productions, and that's what it was now known as, many iconic films came to fruition during this time. Snow White in 1987, Snow White in 1937, Pinocchio 1940, Fantasia, Dumbo, and Bambi. And in 1941, all of the animators were fired over a labor dispute, and it had to be settled by the federal government. And that really changed the way Walt Disney saw the company. He considered these people friends. Anyway, Song of the South came out in 1946, Cinderella in 1950, and Peter Pan in 1953. Now, these are all newly created animations. Lady and the Tramp is released in 1953. Disneyland opened in Anaheim, California in the same year. Not 1953, it opened in 1955. I can't read my own handwriting. Anaheim, California, Disneyland opened in 1955. During the 50s and the 60s, there were television shows that they produced. The Mickey Mouse Club, I remember that, and Zorro. And my personal favorite came under many titles. They kept changing the name, but it was Walt Disney Presents, The Wonderful World of Disney, and Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. That song that came on when it came on, that just played in my head. But every Sunday, I couldn't wait. I didn't care that the crows had exaggerated features depicting blacks. It didn't matter to me. Or that the princess was white and dainty and blonde with blue eyes. That didn't matter either. It was the overall storyline. Girl meets guy, or the prince in that case. Prince loves the girl. They get married and live, what? Happily ever after. I think every young woman, that's all we cared about, the storyline, right? Well, when Walt Disney died in 1966, the company was near ruin. What he said that made all the difference for me. He said, I do not make movies to make money. I make money to make movies. That was his motto. That's what he lived by. And it started to change as new people took over. However, Walt Disney was a visionary, and he had planned for all this other stuff that came later, even before he died. One of the projects that he had was the Disney World Resort that opened in 1971. The main attraction was the futuristic Epcot Center. They brought Epcot Center in around 1982. It was called Epcot, and it meant Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. It attracted about 10 million visitors annually. During the 70s and 80s, old films found that they were their greatest moneymaker, and animation took a back seat. Many top animators left the company during that time. In 1980, Walt's son-in-law, Ron Miller, initiated the company's resurgence by founding Touchstone Pictures. And the following films were critically acclaimed successes: Splash, The Color of Money, 3 Men and a Baby, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? That was cool. Good Morning Vietnam, Dead Poets Society, Pretty Woman, Father of the Bride, and many more. However, nobody knew that this was a Disney company or a Disney adventure. I did. Now, Michael Eisner, he gained power as the chairman and CEO. He was charismatic. Michael Eisner. He would be in the commercials. You would see him with the cartoon characters. And he became CEO in 1984. And he further expanded the company. He established Hollywood Pictures, again, with no mention of Disney. They acquired Miramax Pictures, producing Pulp Fiction, Good Will Hunting, and Shakespeare in Love. Now, Miramax was sold in 2010. Again, these pictures were not synonymous with the image of Walt Disney being wholesome and pure. I mean, Pulp Fiction was a piece of work. So anyway, more changes took place while Eisner was at the helm. And then he had a heart attack. And he was replaced by Robert Iger. The company acquired Marvel Entertainment, Lucasfilms Limited, and 21st Century Fox, making Disney a majority owner of Hulu, the streaming service. So now what happened that suddenly had their old lovable movies come in under fire? I mean, these were movies from back in the 30s and 40s, remember? Well, what was going on back then? In the 30s and 40s, America was a different place. America experienced the Great Depression from 1929 to 1932, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected to president. Everybody was poor and struggling. Nobody had room to be pointing fingers at nobody else or looking down on anyone else. There were poor blacks and poor whites, and we were all in the same predicament. Now, the cartoons and animated films that were made during that time just made us happy. That's all. You know, we were struggling. There were bread lines and soup lines and all these different things that the New Deal, which is what Franklin Roosevelt put into play. The New Deal gave people jobs. I mean, they hired poets, people who went down south and recorded what they called the slave narratives. I mean, all kinds of things were going on in the U.S. to boost the economy and to get us back on track. So who cared at that time what the characters looked like? They were funny. And I don't think Walt Disney had a prejudiced bone in his body. I don't think. He was just naive as to how this lighthearted fun would be perceived years later. So, how did we get here? Well, there have been many, many changes to brands based on cultural and stereotypical protocols, like the Redskins. Remember the Redskins? That was the team in Washington, D.C. They had to change their name because it was considered racist and offensive to Native American Indians. I'm trying to see what their new name is. But Aunt Jemima had to be changed because it was racist, and a stereotypical racist picture on the front with the black lady with the thing wrapped around her head. It's now called the Pearl Milling Company. The Atlanta Braves, which is a baseball team, out of respect for Native Americans, they changed their name, and they stopped using the tomahawk as a symbol of the Atlanta Braves. I don't know what they're calling them now. Uncle Ben's Rice, Eskimo Pie, the Big Boy Restaurant. They took that down. I still don't know why Big Boy Restaurant, except he was a big, puffy looking guy. I think I posted him in my last couple of videos back. I posted him because it was iconic, something that I remembered when we were traveling up and down the highway. So, lots of things have changed, and just in January of this year, Disney had to change their Country Bear Jamboree because they had a character in there named Liverlips. And it was said that it was offensive to blacks because he was a bear with big juicy lips, and they revamped it, took his lips off, changed them, and made his hair blonde. And I don't know what they renamed him. And then in last year, Splash Mountain was closed because it portrayed plantation life and had racist stereotypes in that event at the Splash Mountain. They've now reopened it as Tiana's Bayou Adventure, and it makes her the only black princess in the history of Walt Disney, and they've been around for 100 years. She's in the starring role, and that was off of Princess and the Frog. I don't know, July 10th of this year, they had to close down the Peter Pan ride, That was based on a 1953 film because of the way it portrayed Native American Indians. Just shut it all the way down. Now, I'm going to close with this. What's next? Who will be offended and turn an entire nation around? I don't know. Let me remind you of this name, Madeline Murray O'Hare. Remember her? Madeline Murray O'Hare. She changed the course of history by having prayer removed from schools. And guess what? We've been on a downward spiral ever since. Look her up. Madeline Murray O'Hare. She came to a horrible end. I think she was murdered. Her son was murdered. Madeline Murray O'Hare took the United States school system to court and won. Just think about that. One woman took prayer out of school. One woman. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing and sharing. And remember, you don't know what you don't know. Take care.